Thou, the hunted mother. The mountain air bit at Lyra's lungs as she pressed deeper into the wilderness. Her 4-year-old son Finn clutched against her chest. Pine needles crunched beneath her worn boots, each step echoing like gunshots in the pre-dawn silence. The ancient trees towered above them, their gnarled branches weaving a canopy so thick that starlight barely penetrated to the forest floor. Shadows danced between the trunks, and every shifting darkness made her heart slam against her ribs. They found us, again. The thought carved through her mind like a blade. 3 years. 3 blessed years of peace in that little cabin by the creek, watching Finn learn to walk, to talk, to laugh without fear. She'd allowed herself to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally outrun the nightmare. Mama, I'm tired. Finn's voice was barely a whisper against her neck. His small arms wrapped around her shoulders with the trust only a child could possess. I know, baby. Just a little further. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She had no idea where they were going, only that they had to keep moving. Behind them, the abandoned cabin they'd called home for 3 years was likely nothing but ash and smoke now. The Shadow Council's assassins were thorough in their destruction. The rocky terrain grew steeper, forcing Lyra to use her free hand to steady herself against moss-covered boulders. Her muscles screamed in protest. She'd been carrying Finn for over an hour, ever since they'd fled through the shattered kitchen window while dark figures circled their sanctuary. The pack on her back, hastily stuffed with whatever supplies she could grab, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The prophesied child, they called him. The one who will unite all packs under the true king. Lyra almost laughed at the cruel irony. If only they knew the truth. If only they knew who Finn's father really was. But that secret was buried so deep in her heart that sometimes even she tried to forget it, tried to pretend that those golden eyes that haunted her dreams belonged to someone else entirely. A branch snapped somewhere behind them. Lyra froze, her enhanced hearing picking up the subtle sounds that would be invisible to human senses. The whisper of fabric against bark, the careful placement of booted feet on stone, the controlled breathing of trained killers closing in on their prey. Mama? Finn lifted his head, his unusually perceptive green eyes, so much like his father's, scanning the darkness behind them. Shh! She pressed a finger to her lips, then began moving again, this time abandoning stealth for speed. Let them hear her coming. At least she'd know where they were, too. The forest began to thin as they climbed higher, the towering pines giving way to scraggly mountain shrubs and exposed granite. A cold wind whipped across the rocky face, carrying with it the scent of snow from the peaks above. Lyra's breath came in visible puffs as she pushed forward, following what looked like an old deer trail along the mountainside. Then she saw it, the trail's cruel destination. Ahead, the path simply ended at a sheer cliff face that dropped into a valley so deep it disappeared into morning mist. The first rays of dawn painted the opposite ridge in shades of gold and rose, beautiful and terrible in its finality. They were trapped. Well, well, the little rabbit finally stops running. The voice came from behind her, smooth and cultured, with the kind of confidence that spoke of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere left to go. Lyra turned slowly, shifting Finn to her hip so she could face their pursuers. 3 of them emerged from the tree line, dressed in dark tactical gear that spoke of military training. The leader, a tall man with silver threading his temples, smiled at her with all the warmth of a winter grave. Marcus Blackthorn sends his regards, the man continued, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a silver blade at his belt. He's grown quite tired of your little game of hide and seek. My son is innocent. Lyra's voice came out steadier than she felt. He's just a child. He's an abomination. The assassin's smile never wavered. A mistake that threatens the natural order of things. You should have stayed hidden, little Omega. You should have kept your bastard pup buried in whatever hole you crawled out of. Lyra felt her wolf stir beneath her skin, responding to the threat against her child. 4 years of running, 4 years of fear and exhaustion, and looking over her shoulder, it all crystallized into a white-hot rage that made her vision blur red at the edges. But before she could shift, before she could make her last desperate stand on this windswept cliff, something else stirred in the valley below. A howl rose from the mist-shrouded depths, deep, resonant, and filled with such raw power that it seemed to shake the very stones beneath their feet. It was answered by another, then another, until the entire valley rang with the voices of wolves unlike any Lyra had ever heard. The assassin's confident smiles faltered, and in that moment of hesitation, everything changed. The Alpha King arrives. The mountain air grew thick with tension, carrying the metallic scent of approaching danger that made Lyra's wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin. Ancient pines towered around them like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches creating a canopy so dense that only scattered rays of moonlight filtered through, casting eerie shadows that danced across the rocky terrain. The cliff face behind them was a wall of unforgiving granite, its surface slick with moisture from the evening mist that rolled up from the valley below. Moss clung to the stone in patches of emerald velvet, and the air tasted of earth, pine needles, and something else, something wild and powerful that made her pulse quicken. Lyra pressed Finn closer to her chest, feeling his small body tremble as his supernatural senses picked up on the danger approaching through the forest. The undergrowth rustled with unnatural movement, branches snapping under heavy footfalls that were trying too hard to remain silent. Her breath came in short puffs of vapor in the cool mountain air, and she could hear her heartbeat thundering in her ears like a war drum. 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, and they've finally found us. The first assassin emerged from the tree line like a wraith, his silver blade gleaming in the pale moonlight. Then another appeared from behind a massive boulder, and a third stepped out from behind one of the towering pines. They moved with predatory grace, their eyes glowing amber in the darkness, and Lyra knew with sinking certainty that she couldn't fight them all while protecting Finn. "Nowhere left to run, little wolf," the lead assassin sneered, his voice carrying the rough edge of a man who had shifted too many times. "Hand over the pup, and we might let you live long enough to watch." Lyra bared her teeth, feeling her canines extend as her wolf surged forward. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged." The assassins began to close in, their formation tightening like a noose around her throat. Lyra's muscles coiled, preparing for a fight she knew she couldn't win, when the very air around them seemed to explode with raw, overwhelming power. The Alpha King's presence hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs and making every cell in her body sing with recognition. The ancient magic that bound werewolf souls together roared to life, and Lyra felt the mate bond snap into place with such force that she staggered backward, nearly losing her grip on Finn. No, not now, not him. Darius emerged from the forest like a force of nature made flesh, his massive frame moving with lethal grace between the trees. Even in human form, he radiated the kind of primal dominance that made lesser wolves drop to their knees in submission. His dark hair was longer than she remembered, and his golden eyes, those impossibly beautiful eyes that had haunted her dreams for 3 years, swept the clearing before landing on her with devastating intensity. The moment their gazes met, Lyra saw the exact instant recognition flickered across his features. His nostrils flared as he caught her scent, and his entire body went rigid with shock. "Mate," he breathed, the word carrying across the clearing like a prayer and a curse all at once. The assassins spun toward this new threat, their confidence faltering as they sensed the overwhelming power radiating from the Alpha King. His elite guards materialized from the shadows like ghosts, 5 of the most dangerous werewolves in the kingdom, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger. "You picked the wrong night to hunt in my territory," Darius growled, his voice dropping to the deep rumble that preceded violence. The fight was over before it truly began. Darius moved like liquid, lightning, his claws extending as he shifted partially, bones cracking and reforming with supernatural speed. The lead assassin barely had time to raise his blade before Darius was on him, moving with the kind of lethal precision that had made him a legend among their kind. The other assassins tried to flee, but his guards were faster, cutting them down with ruthless efficiency. The forest floor became slick with blood, and within moments, the only sounds were the heavy breathing of the survivors and the distant call of night birds disturbed by the violence. Darius straightened slowly, his golden eyes never leaving Lyra's face as his claws retracted and his features returned to human form. The mate bond pulsed between them like a living thing, and she could see the war playing out across his expression: desire, betrayal, confusion, and something deeper that made her chest tighten with emotion she'd tried so hard to bury. 3 years, he said, his voice rough with barely controlled emotion. 3 years I've searched for you. Lyra lifted her chin defiantly, even as every instinct screamed at her to submit to her mate. I didn't want to be found. His gaze dropped to the child in her arms, and she watched as understanding dawned across his features like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Finn chose that moment to peek out from where he'd buried his face against her shoulder, his golden eyes, identical to his father's, meeting Darius's with innocent curiosity. The Alpha King's face went absolutely white. Mine, he whispered, and Lyra wasn't sure if he meant her or Finn, maybe both. Reluctant Sanctuary. The fortress loomed against the storm-darkened sky, like a monument to power itself, its obsidian walls rising from the mountainside as if carved from the very bones of the earth. Lyra's breath caught as their vehicle wound through the serpentine approach, past towering iron gates that groaned open at their arrival, revealing courtyards where ancient stone gargoyles perched like silent sentinels. Torches flickered in brass sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind, while the air itself hummed with an energy that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. Darius's scent, pine, leather, and something distinctly predatory, filled the enclosed space of the car, making her pulse quicken despite every rational thought screaming at her to remain guarded. She clutched Finn closer, feeling his small body relax into sleep against her chest, blissfully unaware of the tension crackling between his parents like electricity before a lightning strike. The massive oak doors of the main entrance opened before they even reached them, revealing a grand foyer with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow. Marble floors polished to mirror perfection reflected the light from an enormous crystal chandelier, while tapestries depicting ancient wolf hunts adorned walls that seemed to pulse with centuries of pack history. The air inside was warmer but no less intimidating, heavy with the scents of old wood, burning cedar, and the unmistakable musk of powerful wolves who had walked these halls for generations. This way, Darius said, his voice echoing in the vast space as uniformed staff members bowed their heads in deference, their eyes carefully averted from Lyra and the sleeping child in her arms. She followed him up a sweeping staircase carved from black stone, her fingers trailing along the banister that felt smooth as silk beneath her touch. Oil paintings of former Alpha Kings watched their ascent with painted eyes that seemed to track their movement, and she wondered if any of them had ever faced the choice between duty and family that now confronted the man walking ahead of her. Darius led her to a private sitting room where flames crackled in a fireplace large enough to stand in, the warmth immediately chasing away the chill that had settled deep in her bones during their journey. Soft leather furniture arranged around the hearth invited conversation, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the pack territory stretching endlessly into the distance. The room smelled of old books and aged whiskey, masculine and comforting in a way that made her treacherous heart skip. "Put him down," Darius said softly, gesturing toward a velvet sofa where someone had already arranged pillows and blankets. Lyra settled Finn carefully, smoothing his dark hair, so like his father's, away from his peaceful face. When she straightened, she found Darius watching them both with an expression that made her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. "Now," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that had once made her melt and now made her want to run. "You're going to tell me exactly why you disappeared from my life without a word." The weight of 5 years pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. "I was protecting him," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Protecting both of us." "From what?" The question cracked through the air like a whip. She took a shuddering breath, remembering that night, the shadows in the corridor, the hushed voices that had made her blood run cold. "Marcus, your former advisor. I heard him talking to someone about eliminating any potential heirs before they could threaten the stability of your rule." Darius went utterly still, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You heard him plotting to kill my child, and you didn't come to me?" "I was 19 and terrified," she shot back, finally meeting his eyes. "You barely knew me then. We'd only been together a handful of times. How could I be sure you'd choose me over an advisor you'd trusted for years?" The raw pain that flashed across his features made her stomach clench with guilt, but she forced herself to continue. "So I ran. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later, and by then it was too late to come back. Too dangerous." Darius moved closer, and despite everything, the years of fear, the uncertainty, the bone-deep exhaustion of constantly looking over her shoulder, her body responded to his presence like a flower turning toward the sun. His scent wrapped around her like a physical caress, making her remember nights when she'd felt safe and cherished in his arms, when the future had seemed bright with possibility instead of shadowed by threats. "Marcus has been dead for 3 years," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Executed for treason." The revelation hit her like a physical blow, and she sank into a nearby chair as her legs suddenly felt unable to support her weight. "You could have come home," he continued, his voice rough with emotions she couldn't decipher. "All this time, you could have come home." But even as her heart ached at the lost years between them, Lyra couldn't forget the danger that had found them despite her precautions. Someone else wanted them dead now, and until she knew who and why, nowhere would truly be safe, not even in the arms of the Alpha King himself. The Shadow Council strikes. The fortress walls trembled beneath Lyra's feet as the first wave of howls pierced the midnight air. She jolted awake from restless sleep, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The ancient stone corridors of Darius's stronghold, which had felt so impenetrable just hours before, now seemed to pulse with malevolent energy that seeped through the mortar and into her very bones. Moonlight streamed through the narrow windows, casting eerie shadows that danced and writhed across the tapestried walls, as if the very fabric of the castle had come alive with menace. The scent of burning wood and acrid smoke began to curl beneath her chamber door, mingling with the metallic tang of fear that coated her tongue. Outside, the courtyard erupted in chaos, steel clashing against steel, the thunderous crack of splintering gates, and the guttural snarls of wolves locked in deadly combat. "Finn!" Lyra's voice cracked as she stumbled toward her son's adjoining room, her bare feet slapping against the cold flagstones. The 5-year-old stood frozen by his window, his small frame silhouetted against the orange glow of flames that licked at the outer walls. His dark hair, so achingly similar to his father's, caught the firelight as he turned toward her with eyes wide with terror. "Mama, what's happening?" Finn's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through her panic like a blade. She swept him into her arms, feeling his tiny body trembling against her chest as the sounds of battle grew closer, more vicious. The chamber door burst open with such force that the heavy oak nearly splintered from its iron hinges. Darius filled the doorway, his massive frame heaving with exertion, golden eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to set the very air around him ablaze. Blood stained his torn shirt, and scratches marred his face, but he moved with the deadly grace of a predator in his element. They knew exactly where to strike, he growled, his voice rough with barely contained rage. The Shadow Council has inside information. They bypassed every outer defense, as if they had the castle blueprints memorized. His gaze swept over Lara and Finn with desperate intensity. We need to get you both to the inner sanctum. Now. But even as the words left his lips, the window behind them exploded inward in a shower of glittering glass and splintered stone. Dark figures poured through the breach like liquid shadow, their eyes glowing with unnatural silver light, faces twisted into masks of murderous intent. The lad assassin's lips peeled back to reveal elongated canines that gleamed wetly in the firelight. "Found you," the creature hissed, its voice like grinding bone. Instinct took over as Lyra pushed Finn behind her, her body moving without conscious thought. "Stay back!" she screamed, but her words seemed pitiful against the advancing threat. The assassin lunged forward with inhuman speed, claws extended toward her son's vulnerable form. Something deep within Lyra's chest ignited, a warmth that spread through her veins like molten silver, burning away her fear and replacing it with fierce, protective determination. The air around her began to shimmer and bend, crackling with an energy she'd never felt before, but somehow recognized as fundamentally hers. Power. Luna power. A translucent barrier erupted from her outstretched hands, expanding outward in rippling waves of pure white light that pushed back against the darkness. The assassins struck the shield and recoiled as if they'd touched molten metal, their inhuman shrieks filling the chamber. The protective dome pulsed with her heartbeat, growing stronger with each surge of maternal fury that coursed through her. Darius stared at her in stunned amazement, his golden eyes reflecting the brilliant glow of her magic. "Lyra," he breathed, his voice filled with awe and something deeper, recognition, perhaps even reverence. Behind the barrier, she could feel Finn's small hand clutching at her nightgown, his presence anchor her power and giving it purpose. The magic flowed through her like a river finding its course, natural and right, in a way that made her wonder how she'd ever lived without it. The assassins regrouped, circling the barrier like hungry wolves, testing its strength with careful strikes. But Darius was already moving, shifting into his massive wolf form mid-leap, his transformation so fluid it seemed like watching smoke take shape. His powerful jaws clamped down on the lead attacker's throat, and the battle was joined in earnest. Minutes stretched like hours as the protective shield held, but Lyra could feel her strength beginning to wane, her newly awakened powers demanding more than her untrained body could sustain. Her knees buckled, and the barrier flickered dangerously. "Hold on, Darius," commanded as he dispatched the last assassin, his human form materializing once more. "You did perfectly." As the immediate threat ended, one terrifying truth crystallized in Lyra's mind. Someone close to them had betrayed their location. The Shadow Council had known exactly where to find them, and that meant nowhere was truly safe. Walls come down. The fortress bedroom was bathed in silver moonlight that streamed through tall arched windows, casting dancing shadows across stone walls adorned with tapestries depicting ancient wolf hunts. The air carried the faint scent of lavender from the herb gardens below, mingling with the comforting warmth of the crackling fireplace that painted everything in golden hues. Heavy velvet curtains framed the windows, and thick Persian rugs muffled their footsteps as they moved around the ornate four-poster bed, where Finn thrashed restlessly beneath silk covers. Lyra smoothed her son's damp hair back from his fevered forehead, her heart clenching at his whimpered cries. Even in sleep, the attack haunted him, his small hands clenched into fists, his body rigid with remembered terror. The nightmares will pass, Darius said quietly from the shadows near the window, his deep voice barely above a whisper. The moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face, highlighting the exhaustion etched in every line. I had them too, after my first battle. She looked up at him, surprised by the admission. The Alpha King she remembered had never shown such vulnerability, had never spoken of weakness or fear. But something in his midnight eyes had shifted since the attack. The walls he'd built around himself seemed thinner now, more fragile. How long did they last? She asked, her fingers never ceasing their gentle rhythm through Finn's hair. Months. Darius moved closer, his presence both comforting and unsettling. My father said they would make me stronger. That fear was weakness to be conquered. Finn whimpered again, and without hesitation, Darius reached out to touch their son's forehead. The simple gesture sent electricity through Lyra. Watching this powerful man handle their child with such tenderness made her chest tight with longing. I used to sing to him, she whispered, her voice catching. When the nightmares were really bad, lullabies my mother taught me. Sing now, Darius murmured, settling into the chair across from her. Please. So she did, her voice soft and melodic in the hushed room, an ancient melody about wolves running free under starlit skies. Gradually, Finn's breathing evened out, his small body relaxing into peaceful sleep. When silence fell between them again, it felt different, charged with unspoken words and 5 years of separation. I should go. Lyra started to rise, but Darius's hand caught her wrist gently. Stay, please. The words sounded foreign on his lips, as if asking for anything had been trained out of him long ago. We need to talk. She sank back into her chair, hyper-aware of his thumb tracing circles on her pulse point before he released her. What is there to say, Darius? You made your choice 5 years ago. I made the wrong choice. The admission hung heavy in the air between them. Every damn day I've regretted it. Her breath hitched. She'd imagined hearing those words countless times during sleepless nights in cramped apartments, during Finn's first steps that his father had missed, during birthdays celebrated with just the two of them. Do you know what it's been like? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Running from town to town, never staying anywhere long enough for Finn to make friends? Jumping at every shadow, wondering if today would be the day they found us? Darius's jaw clenched, and she saw her pain reflected in his eyes. I've slept with a silver blade under my pillow for 5 years, she continued, her voice growing stronger. I've taught our 4-year-old son how to hide, how to run, how to be silent when strangers come near. He shouldn't know those things, Darius. He should know safety, stability, his father. You think I don't know that? Darius's voice was rough with emotion. You think I haven't felt every day of his absence like a knife in my chest? I've had investigators searching 3 kingdoms. I've barely slept. He stopped, running a hand through his dark hair. I destroyed everything good in my life because I listened to the wrong people. The raw honesty in his voice made her walls crumble further. I was so scared, she whispered. So alone. There were nights I wasn't sure we'd survive until morning. Before she fully realized it, they had moved to the private balcony, the cool night air carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. The kingdom sprawled below them like a tapestry of lights, peaceful and beautiful. I should have trusted you, Darius said, his hand finding hers on the stone railing. Should have known you would never betray me. Lyra turned to face him, finding him closer than she'd expected. The mate bond hummed between them, 5 years of suppressed longing rising to the surface. His fingers traced her cheek, and she leaned into the touch despite herself. Lyra, he breathed, and she could see the war in his eyes, want battling with fear, love fighting against the vulnerability that had destroyed them before. They leaned closer, drawn by an invisible force, until they were sharing breath, sharing space, sharing the fragile hope that maybe. Lyra pulled back abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't. Not yet. Darius nodded, understanding flickering across his features. Not yet, he agreed quietly. But someday? Maybe, she whispered. Maybe someday. Betrayal and separation. The ancient stone walls of the royal fortress had never felt more like a prison than they did in the suffocating darkness of midnight. Darius paced the length of his chambers, the heavy oak floorboards creaking beneath his restless steps as moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting silver shadows across tapestries that had witnessed centuries of royal bloodshed. The air hung thick with the scent of burning cedar from the fireplace, mingling with the metallic tang of weapons oil and the faint traces of Lyra's lavender perfume that still clung to the silk curtains. Each breath felt labored, his wolf clawing at his chest with primal unease that made his skin crawl with electricity. Something was wrong, terribly, devastatingly wrong. The fortress that had sheltered his bloodline for generations now felt compromised, its towering battlements and iron-reinforced doors suddenly seeming as fragile as parchment. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every footstep in the corridor below could belong to a threat he hadn't anticipated. The very stones seemed to whisper warnings that made his enhanced hearing strain against the oppressive silence. My lord, Marcus's familiar voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Darius's most trusted general stepped from the shadows near the door, his usually immaculate uniform disheveled, silver hair catching the firelight. For 20 years Marcus had stood at his right hand, had bled beside him in countless battles, had sworn oath upon oath of unwavering loyalty. Marcus. Relief flooded Darius's voice as he turned, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. Thank the moon goddess. I need increased patrols around Lyra and Finn's quarters immediately. Something feels. The words died in his throat as he caught sight of Marcus's eyes. They burned with an unholy silver light that Darius had never seen before, cold and calculating where they had always been warm with brotherly affection. The smile that curved Marcus's lips was nothing like the grins they had shared over decades of friendship. This was the predatory smirk of a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. "Oh, my dear Alpha King," Marcus purred, his voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "You're absolutely right. Something is very, very wrong." The scent hit Darius then. Foreign wolves, dozens of them, their signatures masked but unmistakably threatening, saturating the air around them. His wolf exploded to the surface, fangs elongating as his muscles coiled for attack. But Marcus raised a silver device that gleamed wickedly in the firelight. Wolfsbane gas, Marcus explained conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than wielding a weapon designed to torture their kind. One button, and this entire wing fills with enough concentrated poison to drop even an Alpha King. Though I suspect you're more concerned about the matching devices currently positioned outside your mates and pups' chambers. The world tilted sideways. 20 years of trust, of shared battles and brotherhood crumbled to ash in Darius's chest. You're the Shadow Council's leader. The words tasted like poison on his tongue. Guilty as charged. Marcus's laugh was sharp, enough to cut glass. Did you really think we'd let some half-blood rogue and her bastard pup threaten the natural order? Pure bloodlines have ruled for millennia, Darius. Your appetites have made you weak. Rage erupted through Darius's veins like molten lava, his vision bleeding red as his claws extended. Every instinct screamed at him to tear Marcus apart, to paint the ancient stones with the traitor's blood. But the thought of that gas flooding Lyra and Finn's rooms, of watching them suffocate in agony, froze him solid. What do you want? The question emerged as a growl from somewhere deep in his chest. Simple. Marcus circled him like a vulture, savoring every moment of his victory. Abdicate. Publicly renounce your claim to the throne, admit that your bloodline is tainted beyond redemption, and perhaps your precious family will live to see another sunrise. The mate bond pulsed frantically in Darius's chest, Lyra's terror flooding through their connection like ice water in his veins. She was afraid, desperately afraid, and he was failing her just as he had failed her 5 years ago. His pup, their pup, was in danger, and he stood helpless. Choose quickly, Marcus continued, producing a communication device from his pocket. My patience wears thin, and dead hostages serve my purposes just as well as living ones. The throne meant nothing. Crown, kingdom, legacy, all of it was meaningless without Lyra's laugh echoing through these halls, without Finn's bright eyes looking up at him with hero worship. But even as Darius opened his mouth to agree, to sacrifice everything for their safety, Marcus's smile turned triumphant and cruel. Actually, the traitor mused, I think I'll keep them regardless. Insurance, you understand? The communication device crackled to life. It's done, sir. Target secured. Pain, unlike anything Darius had ever experienced, tore through the mate bond as it stretched impossibly thin. Lyra was being taken from him, dragged away to some hidden stronghold where his failures would cost them everything. The fortress walls seemed to mock him as Marcus melted back into shadows, leaving behind only the echo of his laughter and the devastating knowledge that 20 years of trust had been nothing but an elaborate lie. The King's Hunt. The war room in the northern stronghold reeked of sweat, leather, and the metallic tang of desperation that clung to every surface like morning frost. Ancient stone walls, carved with the histories of countless battles, seemed to pulse with the collective heartbeats of 30 alpha wolves gathered around the massive oak table. Torchlight flickered across weathered faces, casting dancing shadows that made the room feel alive with restless energy. The air itself felt thick, heavy with the weight of old magic and newer fears, while outside the fortress walls, autumn wind howled through pine forests that stretched endlessly toward territories unknown. Darius stood at the head of the table, his hands pressed flat against maps that had been marked and remarked until the parchment threatened to tear. Each red X represented a failed lead, each circle a potential Shadow Council stronghold. The bond that connected him to Lyra pulled constantly at his chest, a silver thread of hope that grew stronger with each passing hour, yet remained frustratingly vague about direction. My king, Alpha Marcus of the Eastern Peaks stepped forward, his graying beard unable to hide the concern etched across his weathered features. My scouts report strange movements near the Whispering Caves, shadow wolves, moving in formation. The mate bond flared suddenly, sending warmth cascading down Darius's spine. Northeast. The certainty hit him like lightning, electric and undeniable. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, recognizing something that his human mind couldn't yet grasp. How many? Darius's voice carried the authority of centuries, though his heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. At least 50, maybe more. Marcus traced a finger across the map, indicating a network of caves that honeycombed the mountain range. But Darius, the terrain there, it's suicide to attack head-on. Those caves have been used as fortress positions for over 1,000 years. Let them try to hide. The thought blazed through Darius's mind as he felt his alpha power responding to his desperation, growing stronger with each breath. The very air around him began to shimmer with barely contained energy, and several of the younger alphas took instinctive steps backward. I don't care if they've fortified the gates of hell itself, Darius snarled, his canines extending as his control slipped. My mate and son are in there, my heir, the future of our kind. The words emerged rough, primal, carrying frequencies that made every wolf in the room straighten with attention. Alpha Helena of the southern marshlands, a fierce woman with silver-streaked hair and scars that spoke of countless battles, moved closer. Then we don't attack head-on. The marshlands have taught me patience, strategy. We surround them, cut off their escape routes, force them into a position where surrender becomes their only option. The mate bond pulsed again, stronger this time, and Darius closed his eyes to better feel its pull. Lyra. Her name was a prayer, a battle cry, a promise all wrapped into 2 syllables that he breathed like sacred words. He could almost smell her scent, wildflowers and rain-soaked earth, could almost hear Kai's laughter echoing through the stone chamber. No. His eyes snapped open, and the power that had been building within him suddenly exploded outward in waves that rattled the ancient stones. Every candle flame in the room flared higher, and the temperature rose by degrees that made seasoned warriors shift uncomfortably. No more waiting, no more strategy. I can feel them. They're scared. They're running out of time. Young Alpha Thomas, from the Valley clans, stepped forward, his eyes wide with something that might have been awe. My king, what is this power? I've never felt anything like it. Neither have I. The admission should have terrified him, but instead, Darius felt only clarity. This desperate love, this need to protect his family, had unlocked something ancient within his bloodline, something that had been sleeping for generations, waiting for a catalyst strong enough to wake it. This is what happens when you threaten a king's family, Darius said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness. Marcus, take your eastern wolves and approach from the high passes. Helena, circle around through the southern approach with your marsh fighters. Thomas? He fixed the young Alpha with a stare that seemed to see straight through to his soul. You'll come with me through the main entrance. My king, that's exactly what they won't expect. The mate bond was singing now, a constant melody of connection that grew more beautiful with each mile they would travel toward its source. They think I'll be cautious. They think I'll plan and strategize and give them time to move my family again. His smile was all predator, all alpha king pushed beyond the boundaries of patience. They're about to learn how wrong they are. As the war room emptied, wolves scattering to prepare for what might be the most important battle of their lives, Darius remained behind for a moment. The bond hummed in his chest, a compass pointing toward everything that mattered. Hold on, Lyra. I'm coming. The Luna awakens. The Shadow Council's stronghold reeked of ancient stone, blood, and desperation. Lyra pressed her back against the damp wall of their cell, feeling the rough granite scrape through her torn shirt. The underground prison stretched endlessly in both directions, a labyrinth of suffering carved deep beneath the earth, where sunlight had never touched. Flickering torches cast dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent life, and the air hung thick with the metallic tang of fear and pain. Water dripped steadily somewhere in the darkness, each drop echoing like a countdown to doom. Finn huddled against her side, his small body trembling as another prisoner's scream echoed through the corridors. The sound cut through Lyra's heart like a silver blade, but it was the way her son flinched that ignited something deeper, something primal and burning in her chest. "Mama," Finn whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant sounds of torture. "I can hear them hurting people." Before Lyra could respond, heavy footsteps approached their cell. 3 council guards materialized from the shadows, their faces hidden behind masks carved from blackened bone. The lead guard unlocked their cell with deliberate slowness, savoring their fear. "The boy comes with us," he growled, his voice distorted by the mask. "The council wishes to test his bloodline." "No!" The word erupted from Lyra's throat with unexpected force. As the guard reached for Finn, something extraordinary happened. Power, raw, ancient, and blazing, surged through her veins like liquid fire. The torches in the corridor flared brighter, and she felt her consciousness expand beyond the confines of her physical form. She was Luna. She had always been Luna. The knowledge hit her with devastating clarity. The guard's hand stopped inches from Finn as an invisible barrier shimmered between them. Lyra rose to her feet, and with each breath, her power grew stronger. She could sense every beating heart in the stronghold, could feel the anguish of dozens of prisoners, could taste the corruption that poisoned this place. "You will not touch my son," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the stone walls vibrate. The silver light emanating from her skin painted the cell in ethereal radiance. The guard stumbled backward. "Impossible," one breathed. "She's supposed to be powerless. The suppression runes." "Your runes were designed for ordinary wolves." Lyra stepped forward, and cracks spiderwebbed across the floor beneath her feet. "I am no ordinary wolf." Maternal fury and Luna authority combined into something the Shadow Council had never encountered. She reached out with her newfound abilities, feeling the mystical locks on every cell in the prison. With a thought, she shattered them all. The sound of doors swinging open echoed throughout the stronghold, like a symphony of liberation. "Finn, stay close," she commanded, taking his hand. Her touch seemed to strengthen him, chasing away the shadows that had been creeping into his young mind. They moved through the corridors as chaos erupted around them. Freed prisoners, werewolves, witches, fae, and others she couldn't identify, fled toward whatever exits they could find. But Lyra had a different destination. Her Luna senses guided her deeper into the stronghold, toward the heart of the Council's operations. She needed intelligence. She needed to know what they planned for Darius. The command center lay behind reinforced doors that dissolved at her touch. Ancient scrolls and magical artifacts lined the walls, but Lyra's attention focused on the massive table covered in maps and battle plans. Her blood turned to ice as she read the documents scattered across its surface. They knew Darius was coming. Not only that, they had laid a trap specifically designed to kill an Alpha King. Runic circles powered by the life force of captured wolves, weapons forged from cursed silver, a coordinated assault that would begin the moment he entered their territory. "He's walking into a slaughter," she whispered, her fingers tracing the detailed attack formations. But there was more. Hidden beneath the tactical documents, she found the Council's true objective, a ritual to steal an Alpha King's power, using his mate and child as catalysts. They planned to drain Darius's strength, then sacrifice both her and Finn to complete their dark magic. Rage unlike anything she'd ever experienced filled her completely. The Luna power responded to her fury, growing exponentially until the very air around her crackled with energy. She was done hiding, done running, done being afraid. They had underestimated her because they saw only a rogue wolf who'd been living as a human. They couldn't comprehend that adversity had forged her into something stronger, that motherhood had given her something worth unleashing every ounce of her power to protect. She began memorizing guard rotations, studying the stronghold's layout, identifying weaknesses in their defenses. When other escaped prisoners appeared at the doorway, looking to her for guidance, she wasn't surprised. Her Luna nature called to them, offered them hope and direction. "We're not just escaping," she told them, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "We're going to destroy this place and save our Alpha King." The Luna had finally awakened, and the Shadow Council was about to learn why werewolves bowed to such power. United, we stand. The Shadow Council's stronghold reeked of ancient malice and spilled blood, its obsidian walls pulsing with malevolent energy that made Lyra's skin crawl as she pressed her back against the cold stone. Torches flickered along the corridors, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with lives of their own, while the air hung thick with the metallic tang of dark magic and the musty scent of centuries-old decay. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, each echo amplifying the oppressive silence that surrounded her makeshift prison deep within the fortress's bowels. Her wrists burned where the enchanted shackles had been. Silver mixed with something far more sinister that had dampened her Luna powers, for what felt like an eternity. But now, with her strength slowly returning, she could feel the familiar warmth spreading through her veins like liquid fire. The bond she shared with Darius thrummed stronger with each passing second, telling her what her heart already knew: he was coming for them. "Hold on, Finn," she thought desperately, pressing her ear to the wall that separated her from her son's cell. "Daddy's almost here." The sound of distant explosions made the entire structure shudder, dust raining down from the vaulted ceiling above. Lyra's enhanced hearing caught the clash of metal on metal, the howls of battle, and underneath it all, a roar that made her soul sing with recognition. Darius had found them. Power surged through her like a dam bursting, her Luna abilities flooding back in full force as her mate drew closer. The remaining traces of the Council's binding magic crumbled before the strength of their completed bond, and Lyra felt her eyes blaze gold as she placed her palms against the iron door. The metal groaned, then screamed, as she poured her energy into it until the hinges snapped like twigs. "Finn!" She burst through the doorway just as another explosion rocked the stronghold, this one close enough to send chunks of stone cascading around them. Her son looked up from where he'd been huddled in the corner, his young face streaked with tears, but his eyes blazing with an otherworldly light that made her breath catch. "Mama, I can see it," Finn whispered, his voice carrying an eerie wisdom far beyond his years. "I can see everything they're going to do before they do it. The shadows showed me. We have to get to the main chamber. That's where the prophecy completes itself." Before Lyra could respond, the wall beside them exploded inward, and Darius stepped through the rubble like an avenging god. His massive frame was covered in dust and blood that wasn't his own, his alpha aura blazing so brightly it made the torches pale in comparison. When his obsidian eyes met hers, the relief that crashed over his features was so profound it took her breath away. "Lyra." Her name fell from his lips like a prayer answered, and then she was in his arms, their bond snapping back into perfect alignment with an intensity that made the entire stronghold shake. Power flowed between them, Alpha and Luna united at last, and the Shadow Council's dark magic began to wither in the face of their combined strength. Marcus appeared in the breach behind Darius, breathing hard but grinning fiercely. "The Council's retreating to their ritual chamber," he reported. Then his expression softened as he looked at Finn. "Good to see you safe, little Alpha." "I'm not little," Finn protested, but his smile was radiant as he threw himself into his father's free arm. The moment the three of them connected, something clicked into place in the very fabric of reality around them. The air itself seemed to sing with purpose, and Lyra felt the weight of destiny settling on their shoulders like a mantle. "The prophecy," she breathed, understanding flooding through her. The child who would unite all wolves under the true king and his Luna queen. Finn nodded solemnly, his small hand glowing with silver light. "I can turn their magic back on them, but we have to do it together, all of us." They moved through the stronghold as one, their combined power carving a path of destruction through the Council's defenses. Shadow wolves materialized from the darkness, only to be consumed by the blazing light of their united aura. Ancient binding spells unraveled at their approach, and the very stones of the fortress began to crack under the pressure of their righteous fury. The ritual chamber doors stood before them, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Beyond them, Lyra could sense the remaining council members gathered in desperate ritual, trying to complete whatever dark working they'd begun. But it was too late for them now. Darius's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing as Finn stepped between them. Power flowed through their connection like a river of molten gold, Alpha and Luna and prophesied child standing united against the darkness that had plagued their kind for far too long. "Together," Darius growled, his voice carrying the authority of the true Alpha King. "Together," Lyra agreed, her Luna power blazing in harmony with his. "Together," Finn whispered, and the doors exploded inward before their combined might. The final battle was about to begin. Lyra stood before the ancient stone altar, her heart thrumming with a joy so pure it threatened to overflow. The ceremonial grounds stretched before her like something from a dream. Thousands of werewolves from every corner of the kingdom gathered beneath towering evergreens draped in silver moonflowers. Crystal lanterns hung from every branch, casting dancing shadows across the faces of allies who had once been enemies, united now under the banner of peace. The scent of pine and wildflowers mingled with the earthy musk of the assembled packs, creating an intoxicating perfume that spoke of home, of belonging, of everything she had never dared hope for. The fortress walls rose majestically behind them, no longer a symbol of fear, but of protection and strength. Banners from every allied pack fluttered in the gentle evening breeze, the crimson wolf of the northern territories, the silver crescent of the mountain clans, the golden sun of the southern reaches. 3 months ago, these same wolves had stood ready for war. Tonight, they celebrated love. Darius approached through the parted crowd, magnificent in traditional ceremonial robes of deep midnight blue embroidered with golden wolves that seemed to move in the flickering light. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Those storm-gray depths that had once held such pain now blazed with unwavering devotion and something that made her knees weak with its intensity. He moved with the fluid grace of his wolf, powerful and sure, never once breaking eye contact with her. 3 months, she marveled silently. 3 months since we thought we'd lost everything, and now... You're radiant, Darius murmured as he reached her, his voice carrying easily across the hushed gathering. His fingers found hers, calloused and strong, anchoring her to this moment. My mate, my queen. The ceremonial words began, spoken by Elder Thorn, whose weathered voice carried the weight of centuries of tradition. But Lyra barely heard them, lost in the wonder of Darius's touch, the way his thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles. When they spoke their vows, promises of protection, of fierce love, of standing together against any storm, his voice broke with emotion. I, Darius Kane, Alpha King of the Western Territories, take you as my mate, my equal, my heart, he declared, his words ringing clear across the gathering. Before our people, before the moon herself, I pledge my life, my love, my kingdom to you and our family. Lyra's response came from the deepest part of her soul. I, Lyra Blackthorn, accept your claim and offer my own. I will stand beside you, challenge you, love you, and build this new world with you until my last breath. As their hands joined and the ancient binding ritual was completed, the crowd erupted in howls of celebration that echoed off the mountains. But Lyra only had eyes for the small figure bouncing excitedly at the edge of the altar. Finn beamed at them, no longer the frightened child who had hidden his power. Tonight he wore clothes fit for a prince, deep green tunic that brought out his eyes, his dark hair gleaming in the lantern light. Around him, other pack children clustered, watching in awe as small flames danced harmlessly around his fingers. No fear, no shame, just wonder and acceptance. Did you see, Mama? Finn called out, his voice bright with joy. The firewolves came during the ceremony. Elder Marcus said it means the prophecy is happy. Darius laughed, the sound rich and free. I think the prophecy is very happy indeed, little prince. Later, as the celebrations continued with music and dancing and endless toasts to their health and happiness, Darius and Lyra found themselves on the balcony of their private chambers. The sounds of revelry drifted up from below, but here in the gentle darkness, they could simply be together. Look at him, Lyra whispered, watching through the window as Finn played with a group of children in the courtyard, his laughter ringing out like bells. He's so free now, so safe. Darius's arms encircled her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. He's not the only one, he murmured against her hair. No more running, No more fear, just family. The word settled around them like a benediction. Family. Real and solid and theirs. I want more, Lyra admitted softly, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. More children, brothers or sisters for Finn. A house full of laughter and chaos and love. She felt Darius's sharp intake of breath, the way his arms tightened around her. How many more? He asked, his voice rough with emotion and desire. All of them, she laughed, turning in his arms to face him. I spent so long afraid to want anything. Now I want everything. A united kingdom, a dozen children who never know fear, a love story that lasts forever. Darius cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. Then everything is what we'll have, my queen, everything and more. When he kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise, Lyra tasted their future on his lips, bright and endless, and finally theirs.